Hey everyone. In this video, I wanted to share one of my favorite tech stacks for building web applications. This is a tech stack I use very often for building my own web applications, and I hope you'll find it useful and perhaps you can use some of these technologies in your future projects. So let's get right into it. So here is the tech stack: Next.js, TypeScript, Firebase, Stripe, and Vercel. The reason I love this tech stack is because, first of all, it has a great developer experience, which means that it has all the features you could possibly want for a web application. And second of all, it's really easy to use. So Firebase and Stripe and TypeScript and Next.js and Vercel make it really easy to quickly develop and deploy applications with common features that you would need in a full stack application. In this video, I'm going to go over each of these technologies, why I think they're great, and also why I think they work so well together. So let's get right into it. Let's start off with the framework for building the front-end web application. And in this case, I've opted for Next.js. Next.js is a framework that's built on React. So if you know and love React, then you'll feel right at home with Next.js. Next.js provides some additional features on top of React. So Next.js is called a meta framework because it builds on top of React. Some of the features that Next.js provides are server-side rendering, static site generation, integration with Tailwind, an easy-to-use navigation API, and frictionless deployment with Vercel. If you are experienced with React and you understand how React works, then I highly recommend diving into Next.js, and it seems like a reasonable next step. Not only does Next.js provide all of the usefulness of React in building UI interfaces, but Next.js also provides some additional features, including server-side rendering, which allows you to render the web pages on the server side, which can decrease latency. As for the language that I recommend coding in for this stack, TypeScript is definitely my go-to language for building web applications. In the past, I used JavaScript and I found that the ambiguity that arises by coding in JavaScript, because you're not aware of the types of the data you're working with, what certain functions accept and return, and also just that level of ambiguity in your coding experience isn't that great, especially when you're working with web applications that deal with incoming data and passing around a bunch of data and variables in between these components. It's really useful to have that developer support to know what your data looks like. And that's what TypeScript provides. TypeScript is a lifesaver when it comes to avoiding silly yet nasty bugs, and it will save you lots of lost brain cells when you're developing complex applications. Especially with powerful code completion tools like GitHub Copilot and native VS Code, coding in TypeScript has become easier than ever. Now, one of the most important aspects of developing web applications is the styling you use. And for this stack, I love to use Tailwind CSS. Tailwind CSS is a utility-first CSS framework, which allows you to use really easy drop-in classes for your CSS styles. Tailwind CSS directly mimics a lot of the native CSS classes, which makes it really easy to transition from learning CSS to using Tailwind CSS. And if you're getting started with web development, I would even go as far to say as you should start with Tailwind CSS instead of going to CSS directly. Learning Tailwind CSS can actually be a good primer for you to understand how CSS actually works. And one of the great reasons that I use Tailwind CSS is because it integrates very nicely with Next.js. When you create a app with the Next.js create next app command, it will actually prompt you to whether you want to use Tailwind CSS or not. So it's all integrated into Next.js, and it's really easy to get started. Another fundamental aspect of building a full stack web application is the backend. And the backend is what contains the logic for a lot of fundamental aspects of a full stack application, such as authentication, storage. A backend service would be interacting with the database, cloud functions, so you can run code on the backend, and it can be a lot of extra work to configure the backend yourself. So one route you could take would be to build an API using Python or Node.js and deploy that yourself. And when deploying this backend service, you'll have to manage the deployment yourself. So you'll have to set up load balancers and networking, and we'll talk more about this during deployment, but it's a lot of hassle to set up these configuration. And also setting up the actual logic of these applications can be kind of tiresome. If you want to set up authentication yourself, you'll have to configure a cache, decrypt passwords, and that can be a lot of extra hassle. And that's where Firebase comes in. Firebase is a backend as a service. So it will take care of a lot of these common use cases for building applications. It takes care of authentication, storage, cloud functions, analytics, and so much more. And I love using Firebase because it has a really easy to use TypeScript and JavaScript SDK. So it's really easy to just pop it in your web application and start using authentication and storage really easily and quickly. If you're developing products that need to transfer money and accept money in the form of one-time payments or subscriptions, then Stripe is your go-to partner. Stripe allows you to easily perform these payments online with their hosted UIs. So you don't have to worry about setting up the interface for accepting these payments. Stripe has their own system for accepting these payments, and you can just use their hosted interfaces. But one of the main reasons for using Stripe in this stack specifically is because Stripe integrates seamlessly with Firebase and Next.js. Firebase actually offers an extension which allows you to sync your Stripe customers with your Firebase authenticated users. And that makes it so easy to develop these paid SaaS applications. Here's a sample architecture for a web application that would use this kind of stack. So the users would be visiting the Next.js front-end website. That front-end website would be contacting Firebase to get data on the user, and the Stripe customer and the Firebase user will be synced. So they'll basically be one and the same. So you can reference their payment details, such as if they've paid for the product, and you can do that really easily with this integration. There are some amazing tutorials which you can use, and I found these tutorials really useful for building my own paid applications. So I'll put the links for these videos in the description box below, so you can go ahead and watch them. And they use the same stack that we're using in this video. So this tutorial uses Next.js, Stripe, and Firebase, and this tutorial also uses Next.js, Stripe, and Firebase, and they'll show you how to use that extension. So these videos are great. The final piece of the puzzle is deploying your application. Now, we talked about deployment earlier, and if you're deploying a website by itself, then Vercel should be your go-to option. Vercel is actually the company behind the Next.js framework, and Vercel makes it super, super easy to deploy your web applications to a domain. Some pretty famous companies use Vercel to deploy their web applications, including Notion, Adobe, Nintendo, Under Armour, Perplexity, and Scale AI. Vercel automatically syncs to your GitHub repository and starts a new deployment on each commit. So you don't have to worry about constantly deploying your site. And this is kind of like GitHub Actions. It automatically deploys it on each new commit, which is really convenient for deploying seamlessly and automatically. And this is the entire stack. For the web framework, Next.js, the language, TypeScript, the backend service, Firebase, payments, Stripe, and deployment Vercel. And that's it for this video. I hope you kind of see why I love the stack and probably consider using it for your next project. Don't forget to let me know in the comments what's your favorite stack for developing web applications. I would love to hear from you. What are your thoughts on this? Do you think that this is a good tech stack for building web applications? Are there any technologies you would swap out and why? If you like the video, don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe so you get updated when I post new content. With that, I'll end the video here, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.